AskReddit. Ex-racists of Reddit, what event or events changed you? Grew up in a town with no black people. Dad was very racist. So naturally I grew up racist. Joined the military and was forced to hang out with a melting pot of races. Straightened me out. I started a construction job. Hispanics are some of the nicest, funniest people you'll ever meet. The language barrier even adds to the hilarity. It was an eye-opener that these guys are just trying to make a living and go home, just like me. Landing this job has changed my view on all races, and I'm very happy it did. You can't just hate someone for their distance from the equator. My father was a racist just like his father before him. My dad did his best to indoctrinate me and my brother with his racist ways of thinking. I believed my dad's philosophy was truth until I entered first grade. That year I was sat next to the only black girl in my class. Naturally, I hated her immediately. Not only was she an asterisk, but an uppity one at that. She was more outspoken than most kids I knew, which I considered to be rude, and her style of diction was different from what I was used to, which made it difficult for me to understand her at first. However, as I was forced to interact with her throughout the year, I learned that she was everything my preconceived notions said she shouldn't have been. She was sweet, kind, funny, and intelligent. She helped me grasp the concept of arithmetic, and was easily the best speller in our class. The idea that a black person could have all of those positive attributes, especially intelligence that surpassed that of a white person, flew in the face of what I had been taught all my life up to that point. Knowing that girl was the single experience that made me first question, doubt, and eventually reject my dad's beliefs about race. That girl and I remained friends until she transferred schools after our 3rd grade year. I didn't keep in touch with her and have no idea where she is now. If you're out there, Adia, thank you for just being yourself. You are the very reason why I went down a better path than the one I was shown. I sincerely hope that you are well. I won't say I was racist, but more uneducated. I grew up in a predominantly white town, so when I was 10 and I moved to a city that was more diverse, it was weird for me. All I had to go off of was how other ethnicities were portrayed in pop culture. Well, that and my racist aunt and some other closed-minded family members. So it was weird for me at first, but then I realized we weren't as different at all. All was alright. Plus it helped that my older brother talked to me about it before we moved. We were driving in our dad's black Ford truck and we saw another truck very similar to his, just a different color, that was broken down on the side of the highway. He asked what I thought was wrong with it. I said probably the engine or something like that broke. Remember, I was 10. He asked if I thought it was because that truck was a different color that it wasn't working and ours was. I said no, that made no sense. He said, in fact, why racism makes no sense. Oddly still remember that, but I barely remember us moving. Weird. I actually had a bit of a moment, but I don't know if it counts. My father is an avid user of the N-word and in general has some quite racist opinions, which I inherited. In 4th grade, I switched schools from a school with mostly white kids to one with people from everywhere. That's where I found some new friends with a big mixture of ethnicities. One day I go to a friend's house and he has some friends there and we play video games. At one point I look up and realized I'm the only white person in this room. Before I always thought of Poc as different, there I realized that I was the different one. Ergo, if we all can be the different one, we are all the same. In New York City, different people got along well enough. Outside now defunct CBGB club saw a motorcycle Nazi type dude ready to brawl with black nationalist. Threats, tough talk, etc. Came back later after smokes and beer. They were still there, arm on shoulder, one saying, "This man is my brother." Summer 1989. I come from a family of racists. They spoke of other than whites races using ethnic slurs as common as commenting on the weather. When I was about 5, my older brother and I went into the local bakery to pick up an order for our mom who was waiting in the car. A black boy was in front of us in line. This was something I hadn't often seen, and I said very loudly to my brother, "Look, it's Zarena." My brother quickly shushed me, which made me very confused, but it was the crushed look on the boy's face that made me start to question my family's viewpoint. Over 40 years later, I have a very diverse friend group, but still feel shame on how I made that boy feel those many years ago. Not me, but my 6th grade teacher had a brother who served in Vietnam. Apparently he had a guy in their unit who was pretty openly racist. One day he gets hit in combat, and while the rest of his unit is staying in their bunker, the only black guy runs into open fire and drags his ass to safety. If that doesn't fix UIDK, what would? Technically not racism, but when I was a young lad I detested homosexuals. I didn't understand it and thought it was disgusting until I met my GF's brother. He was openly gay, competed in drag queen contests, and was proud in a redneck Oklahoma town, population 900. He was, and is, one of the nicest people I've ever met, and he totally reversed my opinion of the LGBTQ community. I wasn't a self-proclaimed racist. I actually was very certain I wasn't racist at all. But then as I got older, I realized I had some underlying assumptions about people of color that weren't correct and were racist. What really changed my whole perspective was a video titled something like "Race Doesn't Exist," and I was like, well, that is dumb. But I clicked on it. Among other things, the video showed a photo of Barack Obama and some famous white person I didn't know. The narrator said racially, what is the difference between these two people? In my mind, I was like, well, one is black and one is white. The narrator said, both of these people have one black parent and one white parent. And that's when it hit me. Race doesn't exist. Humans have a spectrum of skin color, some darker, some lighter, but it doesn't make any difference where you are on that spectrum. You're just a human. We made up races to categorize people, but they're all just made up boxes. There's nothing different between a black person and white person other than how much melanin is in your skin. That's it. I realized I had always had these underlying assumptions that people of other races were different than me. And then I realized they aren't, and it changed the way I think about it and interact with my fellow humans. I had a moment ages ago. I was out driving and had to swerve to avoid someone making a slow ass right turn into my lane, like turtle turning. My first thought, damn it, probably some old Asian lady. I drove past, and it was an early 20s white dude just like I was. Even looked a lot like me too. That gave me a crystal clear holy shit that was racist as fuck moment. Not really racist, but we joked around a lot with racial slurs a lot when I was young. I grew up in a small Idaho Mormon town, and in Sunday school we were told not to date outside our race and economic levels. Being the only poor brown person in the room, it made me feel pretty bad surrounded by a bunch of white girls, but that awful feeling made me not want to make someone else feel like that. I cleaned up my language and dropped all the racial slurs, and also dropped out of the church ever since. Also, being called okay for a Mexican dozens of times in my youth only made me want to get away from those things even more. I grew up Mormon in a very small town. This combination provided for a rather unbecoming upbringing. However, once moving to a larger city and then moving again to be near Denver, I realized that race didn't really matter, and I only thought it did because I grew up in a small town of white people. Unfortunately, my family was too old and set in their ways, but my siblings and I avoided the permanent racism. Former I'm not racist. White woman here. Reading a book called The Hidden Brain by Shankar Vedantam changed my mind. It's about unconscious bias. It helped me understand that humans are drawn to people who look and act like them and tend to distrust people who look different. This is an ancient impulse designed to protect tribes of humans from being attacked by outsiders, which may have helped in our hunter-gatherer days, but has no place in a global society. I took the implicit association test discussed in the book, which showed that, surprise surprise, I had some implicit bias. So, from then on, I made it a point to ask myself, am I worried about that person because they're actually acting sketchy, or because their skin is a different color than mine? Now, I'm not racist and more I don't want to be racist. I know that I've been living in a racist society. I know that marrying a black man doesn't give me a free pass or absolve me of racism. I know that my brain, like all human brains, can be full of shit sometimes, and it's up to me to challenge my first impressions of people. Having a ton of friends from different countries growing up, Although I don't think I was ever a racist, I grew up in a pretty white neighborhood with a fair bit of quiet racism about it. I just don't want to be one of those people that is like all the fucking Asians behind closed doors or whatever.